because it can't be cheap for any of this stuff. It can't be.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
All right, you ready to do this?
Yeah, man. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Hello there, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Masmorra.
I'm T90.
And this is episode 17 of the Town Center, your podcast dedicated to all things Age of Empires. In today's show, the RedBull qualification ladder deadline has been reached, and we now have the names of the 4 players that have guaranteed their participation in the main event of the RedBull Wololo El Reinado. I heard you were about to practice that Reinado. Well, there you go.
No. You
welcome.
did not hear that. You did not hear that. You're putting me on the spot, but that was very good. How much did you practice that?
Wait. What was it, Dave? Was it Dave who said that? Somebody said that. I thought it was you. Apparently, it was Dave.
If someone said I was practicing that, they were mistaken.
If the shoe fits, bro, I'll take it. Anyway, the names are Larry, Hera, Sebastian, and NBL. And now that everything is said and done, it's time to talk about the things we thought were good about the system and the things we thought were not so good about the system and all of that. Then we also now know who the casters will be. Though for whatever reason, Tristan, they haven't been officially announced by RedBull. And people who don't happen to be on Twitter might even have missed it. But the choice of casters, in my opinion, does raise some questions here and there, which I think is worth discussing. If you happen to enjoy our show, you know what to do. Smash the like button, smash the subscribe button. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below. We're also available on Spotify, and if that's where you prefer to listen to us, make sure to rate us 5-star. All right, Tristan, my friend, good to see you. We were just talking before. It was nice catching up with you, by the way. We haven't talked in such a long time so thoroughly. So you didn't actually get to stream a lot of the games before on the last day, right, from the RedBull ladder?
Missed the last 2 days, yeah.
Yeah, why not?
I had a friend who's lived up north for a couple years who I've been promising to see, and a couple years added up, and I was like, man, I'm kind of a jerk friend. So, plans are made, and so I was keeping a close eye on things, but I wasn't able to be home casting.
Is this the one guy that I messaged at some point asking stuff about you for our very first interview?
No, it's not. But that was a funny story. That was a funny story because he reached out to me and was like, who is this random person? So,
man, I just thought about it right now as I was asking this question. I might as well tell the story. So this might have been, what was it, 2021? It was the first time I actually interviewed you. I think it must have been 2021. And so as a diligent reporter, if I want to say, or as a diligent interviewer, I wanted to get more information about you. So I messaged your girlfriend. She was still your girlfriend back then, and your best friend at the same time. And at the time when I did that, you were actually streaming. So you were live on Twitch. And it's just here where you go, well, this is weird. Both my girlfriend and my best friend are calling me, and it just go away from the stream. And apparently they all both were trying to contact you because this weird guy is messaging us on Facebook, asking questions about you. Is he legit or not?
This weird guy, you can imagine, like, I don't know anyone from Portugal really, outside of the Age of Empires community, and neither do they. So they're like, who's this random guy from Portugal who's friends with you asking me all these questions? So
oh man, and you were saying, this is so weird. Why would they both be calling me at the same time?
I thought like if your partner calls you and your best friend calls you, I'm thinking there's an accident. Like,
of course.
I was worried.
Yeah.
You must
have been afraid. Yeah, you must have been scared. Yeah, I get it. Totally get it. By the way, I think that's admirable and really great that you are able to just say, okay, because I imagine your content brain goes like crazy. There's a lot of content to be made here. It's the last time of the qualifier. These are high stakes games. And you're able to just go, doesn't matter. I have my social life. It's important to keep a work-life balance. I think that's very admirable.
Well, let's not say I didn't say it doesn't matter, right? Like I'm absolutely like checking my phone all the time. But, for me, right. And I've had some videos where I've talked about balance, right? And, the reality for me, probably a whole nother conversation, but I was like, at a certain point a couple years ago, I was like, your health has gone downhill massively. Your connection with friends, family, everything. And I was like, obviously there's been great benefit with streaming, but you got to find a balance. The numbers might dip, but I knew that I would burn myself out. I would no longer be around if I didn't find a balance. So I try and do that from time to time now. So.
It's not talked about enough, I think. At some point, there's got to be a podcast about that in between us, I think. In any case, Tristan, the ladder is now over. The whole thing is done and dusted. Your thoughts about the whole thing?
Whew, man, I mean, I feel like we should break it up on to almost like the positives and the negatives.
You're so funny. I have a list here: good things, bad things. You go first.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm not, in charge of the structure here, so feel free to
go ahead.
steer us a different direction. I know technically filling in Viper's shoes here, but
Nah,
I still
you're
always
good.
imagine you're driving this whole podcast.
You're a
anyways, right?
co-host as much as he is, so you're good. You're good.
Well, so I want to talk about, just like the flurry of events the last couple days, right? Which I felt was just amazing. Now, again, I covered games like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, started to get that feel, but I was not casting live on the final weekend. And I'd say the last 5 days is really where this format started to catch on for people, and people started to like really double check things. I think a good example of that was the community-made sites, maintained sites that people were using for these crashed.
They crashed
constantly, constantly. And I was saying while I was casting, guys, could you just like not go to the site right now so I can show you on stream, because people just couldn't stop refreshing, and that was like a really fun thing, and then people would look at the elo differences. This was like the last couple hours. They've seen MBL in that 4th position. You got Vinchester and Yo grinding games trying to catch up. And oh man, the speculation. Oh, should such and so queue? Oh man, like
the stories, the narratives are amazing.
Nilly especially speculated to deep levels of, oh well, you should really pick a civ where the games don't last long, or what is considered dragging out a game? Should we talk about that in advance? Like,
I saw really it. Yeah, you were in the chat. Yeah, I saw you were in Nilly's chat. Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah, I was giving Nilly a hard time. I was like, you're going too far, but that was fun, man. That was really fun. And like, it's hard to think about moments where instead of like a really competitive best of 7, to qualify for an event, it's hard to think of moments where you're really like looking at things that way. We haven't had that before. And that was a really cool feeling. And, in my case, I was out late, and typically I sleep in if I was out as late as I was, but I set alarms super early, pissed off my fiance a little bit. I'm like sitting there hungover trying to like scroll through things and find out what was happening. It was fun, man. It was like must watch. And that was super cool to see. And the best part really of the qualifier was just the final flurry of events for me. What your thoughts though on like any other positives to the format?
Yeah, so I have a whole list of positives here, and one thing I'll say, I was very skeptical of the whole system at first because I didn't think Microsoft would invest enough resources to make sure that there's no cheating, that there's no smurfing and all of that. I'm happy that I was proven wrong. I mean, very early on, I got messages from people in the know who were telling me, no, Microsoft is taking this really seriously, and I was very happy to hear. So as far as we know, there was no mass cheating. Then I like that with this system, everybody has a chance. In a lot of these qualifiers, you have like 512, I think it's like the limit, or 256. In theory, everybody's got a chance at this system.
In theory.
So that's I'm grasping at straws here. I'm trying to find the positives. And then I think it's also not dependent on one performance, because form and shape is a thing. You can have a bad day, and all your chances go to shit, so to speak. And so in this system, you have several performances. Though I've seen Barrels actually complaining about this, because then you're always second guessing yourself. Was this enough practice? Was this enough time on the ladder? Then I also have here that this forces people to play a lot, which makes it easier to find bugs in the maps. Which for Empire Wars, I think it's a big deal, right? I mean, we saw so many bugs in this in a lot of the maps. So this really is going to help iron all of those things out and make sure that the main event's going to have very high quality, I think. It promotes a lot of activity in theory, Tristan. I don't know. Was it as much activity as you thought it would be? I got to say, I mean, from the perspective of a story, a narrative, as just you were saying, I thought it was amazing. But was it really active? I'm not sure. Was it?
I didn't foresee, the way it was announced, right? A 3-month ladder qualification. Again, on paper, everyone's got a chance here. The new maps come in. What I expected was the first 2 weeks for content creators to use it as content, which is precisely what happened. Certain people who like to stream, it's a hype moment. We do it. Viewers are going to be interested. It dies for 2 months, and then the last 3 weeks is when people really take it more seriously. I didn't really think it was that active. It wasn't.
I agree.
And it was for that final period, but there. When you think about the potential, it's a ladder everyone has access to. We have a lot of top players with a lot of skill. A lot of players didn't play for reasons we'll talk to. A lot of players gave up early for reasons we'll talk to. And then, some aspects of the format did actually incentivize someone to not play at
Right.
all in the last couple days, to not take risks for whatever reason. So yeah, I didn't think it was. I actually thought it would be a little bit more active than it
Me too.
was,
Me too.
and I wasn't expecting it to be incredibly active in the first place. So
If I remember correctly, Yo was struggling to get opponents, like in the last
Mhm.
day. I think it's
Yeah.
got a lot to do with the time zones as well. So one thing, and I think this might be one of the biggest positives actually of the system, is that you actually had like a big fat Red Bull logo whenever you're trying to hit
Yeah,
that
yeah.
matchmaking queue, right? And if you think about, I believe, well, I just went again and checked it yesterday, but I'm not entirely sure the numbers anymore. I think we have like 43,000 people playing the 1v1 ladder each
Mhm.
month, and 73,000 playing the team game ladder. So we can't add up these people because there's a crossover between both,
Yep.
of course. But that's still a lot of people who saw
They're
the
all
logo
seeing it.
there, right? Yeah, they're all seeing it. Now, unfortunately, you could actually click that thing. It doesn't take you anywhere or anything of the sort, which would have been so easy to do, right? I don't know why you wouldn't do something like this.
I mean,
And yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's like the laziest implementation of exchange ever. Like they essentially reworked the map pool, kept the same Empire Wars ladder, renamed it, and added a logo there. Nothing changed. And yeah. So, anyways, go on. It was.
Yeah, no, I
it
think
was
it's
rough.
big. I think that's big, and I think that's important, even if they did link to the website doesn't have a lot. I mean, it doesn't have the name of the casters, for example. It's a very empty website, but there you go. And one point that I saw raised from Dave as well is that it was a lot of hours watched, which is absolutely true. You don't agree? I think I agree, because it's so much longer than a usual. I mean, I guess he was talking about it in comparison to like a qualifier. I believe that was the
Which
context
I would
of the whole
disagree
thing.
with heavily. Yeah.
I think it's more viewers for sure, but hours watched when you have like a 3-month ladder qualifier and you have, I think in total hours watched, I think I would agree with him. I don't think that tells the
are we
whole
talking
story.
hours
but-
watched? Like hours watched also is based on viewers as well, right?
Right.
So like if you have 1,000 viewers watch 1,000 hours versus 10,000 viewers watch 1,000
Right,
hours.
but the timing is just a lot bigger. You have 3 months of ladder qualifier. When you're talking about a qualifier, like a bracket qualifier, a normal qualifier, it's usually like 1-2 weeks. So the difference in time is going to make it so that the hours watch is going to be higher. I mean, I think it's pretty fair to say.
Maybe. I think viewership would have been significantly
For sure.
higher.
I'm going to bring that up. Viewership, there's no discussion that viewership in terms of peak and average is bigger. But if you consider the length of the whole thing,
Yeah, I still am not sure I agree on that. I could see the point though, right? That
Okay.
technically it was 3 months. From
Right.
what I view, like from a casting perspective, none of the casters really were super involved the first 2 weeks because it takes 3 months.
Agreed.
The last 2 weeks there, and obviously the last couple days there was a lot of activity, but I felt like the system didn't really incentivize good hours watched because of no scheduled times. You didn't know what was happening.
Right.
Inactivity at
Agree.
various points, and very hard for viewers to know exactly what was going to happen, except for the
Absolutely.
last 2
That
days.
would
But-
all affect like average viewership and peak viewership, which I
Yeah,
think
which
it's not
is-
what Dave was talking about.
Okay.
But it does influence hours watched for sure.
Absolutely.
But anyway,
Yep.
so then moving on to the bad things, the things that I've saw thrown around the community and the things that I feel also are not great. And feel free to go more in depth if you want to do it. The games just don't play at all like tournament games, right? They're not very interesting. There is a lot of mirror matches. People are being very picky with who they play against. People are all camping their points and all of that. And this is not to criticize the players. Players have this system. They play to their advantage. That's totally fair. But I don't think this is a great promotion for Age of Empires 2 as a game, right? Age of Empires 2 is more than this.
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, what I kind of think about when you think about, okay, what is a qualifier? What is the goal of a qualifier, right? The goal of a qualifier is to get the best players for an event, right? And with that, typically you then have event settings utilized for the main event. Now there are, or for the qualifier rather. And yeah, I understand that we're going to have a lot of these maps in the main event. These civilizations will technically be available, but the reality is we haven't seen mirror matchups to this level in Age of Empires 2 maybe for 10 years. And and even then, like we'd have to dive into the weeds, but we might have seen less mirror matchups back in the day. Even though we had significantly less civilizations and we had free pick of civilizations for a lot of situations. So that's true. Like present day Age of Empires, civ drafting is a big aspect of the game, which essentially ties itself to strategy. And additionally, the way like you combine with how elo works with wins and losses versus like a best of 5 or a best of 7 influences things way differently. So it was very repetitive, not only in the civs but also with the maps,
Right.
which helped some players and hurt others. And then of course, some viewers liked and did not like that. So it was very different in that regard.
Mm-hmm. So then you have people saying that this gives full timers an advantage. And I've told you this before last episode, and it's not entirely clear to me that having a system that slightly gives an advantage to full timers is actually a bad thing. I've talked about this last episode, but in my opinion, I just think you want to encourage people to go full time, right? I don't know, encourage is not the right word.
Play the game a lot.
Yeah, you want people to to busy themselves with the game as much as they can. So if you have a system that gives a slight edge to full timers, that's not necessarily a bad thing for me, because you're actually making it more viable for them to actually go full time.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there's a tipping point, and there's a very fine line there where it's just way too much advantage. But this could be considered by some people a bad thing. And another thing that I also think is bad was, for example, I read somebody talking about a particular game. Hey, that game with Mihai was amazing. And then I'm like, okay, how the hell am I going to find that game? This wasn't streamed by I don't know if my favorite streamer streamed it. I just don't know.
Yeah.
If it's the tournament.
It's the same civ. It's like, oh, it's the Byzantines war on Hollow Woodlands.
Good luck.
It's like, okay, let's look. He's played 15 in the last day. Like,
right. Good luck finding it. Yeah, that's so true, right? If okay, so it was the quarterfinals. Let me go to Wikipedia. Okay, so my favorite streamer has streamed it. It's so much easier, right? And then a lot of the games weren't even streamed. At some point, people are just like, I don't want them to know that I'm actually online, so I'm not going to stream my games.
Yeah.
All of these things play a role, right?
I think, to the topic of like, and I guess like somewhat connected to full timers being more incentivized. I actually, I'm not even sure that's necessarily true with the people we had playing here. I think we had.
I think so.
Like, I think if Leary and Hera, I don't know, had like busier days for the last week, I think their quality is really good. Obviously, Sebastian needed a lot of time. So, yeah, maybe you're taking a couple days off from work if you're working, but the quality was there. MBL, I felt like the quality, but particularly the strategy with how the system works, which I want to talk about, was there too. So I'm not sure I agree there. I think something that was disappointing to me is, initially I thought, because of how this works on paper, is everyone can try to compete for this thing, right? But if you compare, the chances of an individual who, let's say, is 18 years old, ranked 32nd on ATP right now, we've got a couple floating around there, in a qualifier versus a 3-month ladder. The 3-month ladder actually it has less strategic variation to surprise anybody, right? And then you need an insane level of consistency, right? Combined with when someone gets the higher elo, they can just sit on their points. So I was thinking about it, and I talked to a lot of people, and you could look at the ladder. Like, there were many people who around the 20th to maybe 30 plus where you'd be like, dude, top 100 grind. They didn't even try.
Right.
Because there's no way I can get top 4. Whereas we're going to see these names sign up in this replacement qualifier potentially, because even though it's tough, it is more realistic that they could, with good strategy and preparation, beat a better name in a best of 5, snowball that in good form into another best of 5 victory, and then who knows? Winning more than the top 4 in 500 games over a 2-month span is way harder to do there. And so that was disappointing. What I like about qualifiers is who's going to be that next Sebastian, right? Who's going to be that guy who's going to take the moment and run with it? The system, I didn't feel encouraged a lot of that.
Yeah, it's more, qualifiers are more conducive to those types of stories and surprising runs and all of that. I 100% agree. Now, one of the big things, Tristan here, and I think a lot of people talked about it, I agree 100%, is that there was no prize money for those who didn't make it. Yeah. And those who did make it got $9,000.
Minimum.
Minimum, right? Yeah. This is a lot of money. And on this note, this was just happening before we started recording, actually. So there was a discussion going on in the RedBull server, and Crazini provided a little bit of background and context for why they went for this. Only 4. I'm going to read it to you. So I quote, "To provide just a little bit of reasoning and context, our approach to the tournament ladder was cautious, I know. But given that we are treading unexplored territory, this seemed like the most responsible choice. It was a considerable challenge to predict what kind of issues could arise, and putting more money into the pool and encouraging more players to participate could have created situations that would have been very problematic to manage. Without knowing what could have happened, I'm still happy that we decided to take this more conservative approach." What I hear here, Tristan, I might be wrong, but what I hear here is we have enough resources to monitor the top 4 players and to make sure that nothing suspicious is happening there. But if you're opening prize distribution to more and more people, this becomes exponentially harder to track and to monitor. That's what I'm sort of reading here. Maybe I'm reading too much, but what do you see?
I see a very political response, which was well worded, right? We understand we understand your concerns. We understand. We were kind of thinking about going into it. We haven't tried this before. We did our best with the situation, and we're happy with it. I feel like the response kind of checked those boxes for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that monitoring players, if we expanded the prize pool further, would have been much of a concern at all. I think what would be weird is giving prize pool for ladder positions for players who then are going to play in a qualifier who then might lose the first round. It feels weird. I feel like you should be gifting that you should have prize pool attached to the backup qualifier. I don't know. My thinking, just to dive right past this personally, is anyone's criticisms of qualifying through the ladder and all the issues that could provide. And then also, the prize pool split or even how the next qualifiers run. A lot of it just comes down to the fact of the percentage of players coming through via these qualifiers. If it was 4 people, top 4 on the ladder, and we had 8 people qualifying through a separate qualifier and the event was bigger, a lot of my gripes go away with it because it's there's a lot more opportunity there. Currently, unfortunately, the reality is you look at Vinchester and Yo, who are 5 and 6. It is very likely that neither of those players make it to Spain for the main event. Now, will they be favored? Sure, but the way these brackets are situated, and again, with how drafts can work and how good the level is, I would put money on one of them not making it at least, which is a sad thing. And so then a player has played for months, or let's be realistic, maybe 3 to 4 weeks, all day, every day. They don't get the opportunity to go to Spain. They don't really make much money in comparison. Which could be fairly brutal. And what I mean by that is another thing I would have liked to see here, even with 2 people coming through this backup qualifier, I would have loved to see a higher chunk of the money going to the qualifier. So you got 12,000 going to this last chance qualifier. The player who loses in the final, so the decider, which there will be 2 of, will get 3,000, right? Which is a lot of money. The 4 players who would lose and the semifinals of it would be 1,500. Now that's great money, but you compare the main event prize pool to that, and it's not even 10%, right? It's not even 10%. Not to mention, a big part of these things is seeing your friends, the experience. So they're going to be gutted. They don't get the experience. It's well below 10%, and they will have played 3 to 4 weeks nonstop, all-nighters type of situation. So if I were Vinchester, and if Vinchester doesn't get in, it'd be hugely disappointing. Vinchester played over 50 games. I ran out of pages to scroll through on this. The last 3 days, he played over 50 games and just came up short because of the way the system worked. And I think everyone was telling him to do it. I think it was very smart. MBL played, I think, 8 games in the last 3 days, right? If you're Vinch and you grinded 4 days in a row, and then you just don't make it in this backup qualifier, you're going to look at this with a negative outlook, right? Yeah. And with disappointment that I think could have been mitigated somewhat with some slight changes,
Well, my last point goes exactly to what we were just talking about, which is the players don't like it. 2 weeks ago, I actually messaged a couple of players just to, get a feeling. Do people actually enjoy this? I don't want to say the names of the people that I messaged, but yeah, people, all of you know. And all but one and I say this publicly because he said it himself, all but one said the system is horrible. The one that said the system might be good was Hera. And then yesterday, I heard him say live on stream, I did a completely 180. I hate the system now. And that's why I feel confident saying this publicly. He was like, yeah, I like that it encourages activity on the ladder of all of that and all of that, but it's just too stressful for the players. And you could see that. You could see that in MBL. And to those of to the folks at home who are actually following the last hours during the last day, Neely was streaming it. A lot of people were streaming it. You could see MBL was just out of his mind, worried, stressful. I think he said he was even throwing up, if I'm not mistaken. It was that bad for him, And the one thing I totally understand, and then one thing I do want to say about that is that if you're getting guaranteed $9,000, I think a little bit of stress is warranted, right? $9,000 is a lot of money, but it seems to me, from what I hear from players, it just completely crossed the line that it's not healthy anymore, probably.
But you could, I agree. Sometimes some of the best viewing, some of the best competitive event of any kind is when the levels of stress are at its peak, right? Who can deliver through these moments? But I think there's plenty of middle ground to find in the future with it, because I think you could still have intense hype moments. You could still have lots of reward at the tail end without some of the extremes here, is my feeling. And I had 3 players who I was not reaching out to or messaging come to me and beg me, please do not do this.
Never do this again.
Please, use your influence to talk to whoever. Please never do this for one of your against. And one of them said, this is easily the most disappointing and frustrating experiences I've ever experienced as a pro, and they've been around a very long time.
Does it start with an N and end with an Av?
I will not speak to who said those words.
I'm so sure though it's Nickov. I'm so sure it's Nickov. But it's fine.
But I mean, it's I agree with the players on this. I think it was too much. But there have been a lot of instances where we have started something in the scene that's different. I think of like Civ drafting even. And initially there's positives and there's negatives, right? I think the goal with anything is you learn and move on from there. So I hope that that is essentially what the goal is from Red Bull side and Microsoft side. And from what I know, there is people behind the scenes are kind of like, oof, okay, we're seeing how people feel about this. And so, if I were in their position, from what I know, they do seem to care. Can't do anything right now, of course. But, if there's a future event, I'm very positive that they will try and take the good, keep it, and integrate that by fixing some of the bad. That's just my feeling, though. So
Right. Okay, so when it comes to, do you want to see this again or not? For me, the important question here is how this system compares to what we could have otherwise have had, right?
Okay.
Just a regular bracket qualifier or whatever you want to call it. One thing I will say about the system is that it actually accomplished its mission as far as I'm concerned. The 4 people who qualified are absolutely worthy of qualifying, right? These guys, no one doubts that MBL, Hera, Sebastian, who am I forgetting? Larry. No one doubts these guys deserve to be there. These guys have worked their asses off. So in that sense, I think it's definitely mission accomplished. But yeah, I just think the alternative is better. It's a lot easier for casual viewers, in my opinion, to follow a tournament or a qualifier when you have like a fixed schedule, you have a calendar, okay, I know that in 2 hours, my favorite streamer is going to be casting some high-level Age of Empires. Hey, family, leave me alone for 2 hours, just 2 hours, okay? And you see this, right? Whenever you have like a fixed calendar, like a schedule for tournaments, you see the viewership go up. And I think this means that these are all the casuals who only tune in once in a while, who are really taking the time to watch these things. And yeah, in general, Tristan, as well, I think qualifiers have been so good these last few months, right? You have so many people really rising in level and playing amazing Age of Empires 2. And this system kind of robs them of that possibility. And just one last point before I let you respond. The viewership. I've checked the numbers on this. Hidden Cup 5 qualifier had a peak of 15,000 viewers. NAC 5 Qualifier 1 had a peak of 17,000 viewers. NAC 5 Qualifier 2 had a peak of 16.9 thousand viewers. Pretty safe to say in terms of peak viewership, there is no comparison between the two systems. Again, we can go back to hours watched and whether that's a better metric for the ladder qualification.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, and there's also the YouTube side, which does way more than anyone, I think, recognizes for regular stream viewers, too, which you have the player names, you have the full series. It gives people an idea of what they're watching. They're likely to click. I didn't even record a single cast of Empire War stuff because it's just all over the place. It's hard to really have a structure to it. Yeah, I agree. I think the alternative is better. Ideal world, it comes down to the number of invites to this event, which, of course, would require a significant amount more money and commitment from the organizers, which is probably more than people realize. So we were very spoiled when we had like 14 people in a castle before. That wasn't realistic here, which is, again, what I think makes the 4 from the ladder qualifier hurt when you only have 2 for the normal qualifier. If it was 4 from the ladder, 6 to 8 from a standard qualifier, then a lot of this changes. But I mean, again, my final point is I agree with you. The 4 that make it, that you can't dispute that they are the best players for it, right? But it is weird to me when one of them that qualifies is using my buddy MBL as an example, played 8 games in the crunch time of the last 4 days and was able to play it smart. You had Vinchester playing over 50, right? You had situations where it was clear Yo needs to find an opponent right now, right? I personally prefer players having to beat the best players in best ofs, civ drafts, map drafts, the exact same thing we're going to see in the main event, right? That is true competitive Age of Empires. There's no dodging or pre-dodging or questions or any of that. It is just simply show up and one great competitor has to best the other. And I felt like in some ways, the ladder qualifier kind of took away from that sometimes.
I also think in general, qualifiers are such an amazing promotion tool for the main event, right? I see that all the time with your Hidden Cup, right? So you weren't one of the only ones who actually only makes one qualifier and a pretty big one. Or that was the case at least for Hidden Cup 5, which is the one that I remember the most. So it had like one big qualifier, and the games were amazing. And you stretch it over a month or whatever it was, and people throughout this whole month are seeing high-level Age of Empires, amazing players, right? And they're learning about the main event that is going to happen, whenever. All of that's, in my opinion, just suddenly goes away when we have this ladder qualifier. I saw tons of people in your stream asking, what is this? What are people playing here? Nobody knew about this, right?
Yeah, and back to what I said earlier, there were a lot of really good players who played in the NAC qualifiers, who played in the Hidden Cup qualifiers, who quite simply said, I'm not going to even grind this ladder. And they just played regular ranked. And I think that's just because it's a dream, but maybe possible to have a good run with good strategies and good prep over the course of like 4 rounds with best of 5s. If you've got to play 300 games better than Hera,
forget it.
And when it's mirror matchups, most likely, right? So you can't even like out strategize or out
It's a lot of execution, yeah.
Yeah, you just again, it's just really talented players just straight up didn't try for this, and that kind of, I like it when people are always trying to give their best and feel like there's hope.
Yeah, one thing that I saw a lot of people recommend and talk about, and I 100% agree, is that I still would love to see the ladder incorporated in some way into the qualification of future probably S tier tournament. Now, one thing I want to say about this is it's not entirely clear to me, Tristan, that Microsoft is willing, to make a specific ladder and reset the whole thing, make a new map pool. They're willing to do that for RedBull because, a lot of money, a lot of exposure. I'm not sure they're willing to do that for a future tournament, but if they are, I think it would be amazing to have the ladder be incorporated in some way. People have said, and I think this is a great idea, for example, you make an extra qualifier for the top 32. The top 32 on the ladder get to play a qualifier between themselves. And maybe you can give, I don't know, like the top 4.
Depends how many spots, right? Again, it just comes down to how many people get in. But I agree.
But still, you're still making the ladder, important, meaningful, and yet it's not the one thing that decides everything, right?
I agree. Yeah.
I think it's a pretty good idea. Again, give more money to players, potentially a good idea too. I've heard a few people recommend that we could maybe use a more aggressive DK system. And the counter argument to that would be that it, again, favors full-timers a little bit more because they have more time to grind. Which, again, I would have to go back and say it's not entirely clear to me that it's a bad thing. But it's an idea, use a more aggressive decay system just to make sure that people cannot just camp their points. Do you see a way that the ladder could be incorporated and still be meaningful and still help players qualify to the tournament?
Yeah, 100%. But again, I think it comes down to the amount of players that qualify in each. I think top four, like using the top four, for example, with this one, you have top four. We'll go based on the invites, right? So we had like 2 invites, 4 qualify through ladder. Usually, if it's an online event, you're at least having 16 people. So then you're going to have 10 people qualify, maybe in separate groups in a bigger bracket. I think that's great. I think that's super fun. And like, it's best of both worlds. If I were an event organizer, I have viewers playing on my maps. I have there being more hype surrounding the event coming up and people figuring things out on the ladder. And then there isn't a question then of like, hey, okay, did players get screwed over, or is this person very unlucky? I think no one's going to complain when you got 2 invites, you got 4 people through ladder and like 10 through ranked. It just comes down to the ratios for me, as well as the ratios of the money that we're talking about too. I personally think qualifiers in general should be like 20% at like the minimum for our scene for something like this, which this one was not. But again, things to learn from, right? Like I'm kind of getting excited thinking about this, things to learn from, and I think that ultimately the way the main event goes, I think, is going to influence how Microsoft and Red Bull treat everything.
Agreed.
The qualifier's always been a bit of an afterthought, but yeah, I think things to learn from and maybe build on.
I think the idea of people actually practicing on the ladder, they have the map pool of the tournament, they can practice on the map pool. I think it's a very appealing idea to me and to a lot of viewers, right? And again, you really encourages people to practice more. It's a lot easier to find opponents and all those things. So if you could incorporate it in a meaningful way and in a way that doesn't give a lot of players an unfair advantage, I would be all for it. But again, it's not entirely clear to me that it's worth it for Microsoft to, create an extra ladder every single time there's an S-tier tournament. It's not clear to me they're willing to do all that effort. I don't know.
Sure.
I want to talk a little bit about the players who qualified. Tristan, I mean, Hera Valeri, not much to say there. You would absolutely expect him. MBL has been in LAN before, right? He's been in Red Bull LAN before. Wait, was he on both of them? I remember he was in the first one where you beat Hera very famously. Was he in the second one in the Legacy? I'm not sure anymore.
I feel as though he wasn't. I feel as though he wasn't at the second one. We could quickly look. We're horrible with preparation here. Apparently.
Yeah, you go ahead and look it up.
Yeah. I don't have many strong. Actually, no. I think he was. He was because I do have a strong memory. I'm going to double check now. MBL was there. Yes. He was there in the main event. I mean, we're here. People are here for the content, right? So MBL. He didn't tell his work at that time where he was or what he was doing, right? And he had to work during when the semifinals would have been. He already had his flight scheduled as if he was going to lose his quarterfinal against Hera. And I remember being in the back room and MBL's like, just like, he literally booked flights and work around not winning the quarterfinal. And I was going to be casting that quarterfinal. And I was just like, you got Hera who's locked in. He's ready to go. MBL's like already literally scheduled to leave. So MBL's like, that's just such an MBL thing to me. I think he should come in with a lot more confidence this time. And I believe now with this situation, his work's like kind of cool with him integrating his esports with his normal job. So, but he was there.
Yeah. So
I just was so disappointed that, that whole situation played out the way it did.
Yeah, but that must have been during Red Bull 5. Enthroned.
That was Red Bull Legacy.
No, I don't think so. I think the one where he beat Hera was the Enthroned one. I'm almost
no. But he also So correct. Enthroned is the crazy reverse sweep from MBL.
Right.
That was in that situation. I don't know. I know MBL maybe lack confidence. I have no stories there except for the fact that that was one of the craziest sets that I've ever covered in my life.
Right.
But they did also play the next Red Bull. So that was Red Bull Legacy.
Yeah, I just checked.
And that was where MBL's like, I'm going home. already. The games kind of reflected he didn't have confidence, and then Hera got the win there against MBL in the quarters.
Okay, so for Sebastian, though, I think this is going to be his first LAN, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah.
Well, what a year for this guy, first of all, man. What a year. Again, whenever I hear him talk, he just radiates this sort of aura of coolness. You know, he's got it all together. And that's the sort of vibe that I get from him. Do you see him really getting the nerves and getting jittery when it comes to a LAN tournament, or you think he's going to be able to master it just fine?
Well, I mean, I've said many times now, he's the first player in years that has just kind of felt inevitable to me, inevitable to be top 5. I thought he was inevitable to be top 4 in the ladder. Friday, I was a little concerned by that, but then he had a big run, on Saturday. Yeah, he's just good. Like, he's clearly good. He's consistent. He fits the style. I think, the meta right now suits him. I've loved how he's able to push through diversity if things go bad, which is so unbelievably difficult. His consistency stays the same, which you can't say about many. So he has that. It is going to be his first LAN. It is in a castle. There's lights, there's cameras.
Right.
My first time doing any of that, I choked big time. I still remember. And I'm just talking. Well, I would say
guilty as charged.
I would just say that it is different, but I'm also not certain if any of the aspects of this LAN is going to feel normal to anyone, even if they've been there before.
Right.
So I think his current ability to just push through the moment and be an amazing player is just incredible. So my odds, my thinking right now is that no one's going to want to play Sebastian in that first round, because he's really looking good.
Yeah. The guy exudes confidence. I think he's great. Last Chance Qualifier, your favorites to qualify from there?
Well,
I think sorry, before you go on, I think we know for a fact that Vinchester and Yo are going to be seed 1 and 2, if I'm not mistaken, because I believe the placement in the ladder qualification are going to work as seeding for the Last Chance Qualifier. So.
Which essentially means, when you look down the ending rankings, that would extend past them as well, right? So, which the good news is that you shouldn't have like a Yo versus Vinchester round 2 matchup or anything like that. But I'm curious if it's 1 and 2. I don't know. I'd have to see the bracket, which we don't have yet, right? So it's very hard to say favorites. I will say I think chances for certain players go up in this type of actual, tournament Age of Empires format. First name that comes to mind for me is Doubt. I never saw Doubt as a player who would play mirror matchups and grind the ladder and get top 4. But when you're talking about, when the meta is kind of established for maps and you can draft for your opponent and strategize, Doubt immediately goes up. Yo, Vinch, Hart, Sito, actually just the 5th through 8th there on the ladder, probably the top 4 favorites though. Those guys are really good. I love how Hart and Sito are just so consistent in their aggression, and then Yo and Vinch can do kind of either, which is super interesting. So they both have this tendency to switch it up on you and go for the full eco approach and not the aggression. Which can hurt or
makes them unpredictable. Yeah. I like it. All right. So just to make it clear to folks who haven't been following the whole thing, between August 10th and August 18th, the Last Chance Qualifier is going to be taking place, and 2 people are going to be able to qualify through that one. All right. So the next topic I want to talk about here, Tristan, are the casters. And fair warning, this is going to be maybe a bit uncomfortable for you, maybe a bit for me as well. We're going to have to tread a bit carefully here. First thing, we have casters. I don't know if these are all the names. Again, RedBull, for whatever reason, hasn't announced anyone, but people have announced on Twitter. So the names that we have so far are T90, Mem, Dave, Nilly, Jordan. Jordan is not officially announced, actually, but my source is telling me he's going to be there, and he's going to be sort of an analyst. That's what my sources have been telling me. So not a caster, more like an analyst. Then we have Nacho and Mario Valle, or Ovage. I believe that's how it's pronounced. And
did you mention Mem?
Sorry, didn't I? T90, Mem, Dave, Nilly. I thought I said
you
all
might.
those.
You might have, but
yeah. So the big 4, I want to say. Jordan, Nacho, Mario Val, and Riley Knight's going to be the host. That's been officially confirmed by him as well. And funny enough, a lot of players have complained more casters than players, which is not too wrong.
That's actually kind of funny comment.
It's not more, but it's interesting enough. Again, just goes to show that in our community, content creation plays a big role. That's why you have so many content creators.
Yeah, and you got like the Spanish side being brought in again, which was huge. So it's not like it's necessarily like they're a separate team. Riley Knight's the host. It's a little different, but yeah, it's a big thing, and happy to be there. I know there will be some talent for the other games as well.
Right. Killer Pigeon I've seen has been confirmed for AoE 4.
Yes.
Don't know about the other ones. In any case, yeah, go ahead.
I know, but I don't know if it's my place to say for some of the other things. So I'm just going to shut up on that. But
sure, absolutely. So my thing here, I'd like to concentrate on the situations of Jordan and maybe Nilly too. And again, I wish I didn't have to say this, but I will. It has nothing to do with the people, with these two personalities. I love them both. They're going to do an amazing job. But the thing is, they're more or less retired, especially Jordan. Nilly maybe less so, no? And so I wonder what do the up-and-coming streamers and content creators in our scene are going to do when they look at this. When was the last time that Jordan casted a game? Must have been NAC 5, so in January, if I'm not mistaken, or February. I don't remember what it was. Nilly, last time he casted a tournament game must have been there as well. He's been casting now. He casted a couple of the games from the ladder, right? So I wonder if you're an up-and-coming content creator in the scene now, and you see, I rarely get a chance to cast these big events, and now even the people that are not active in the scene anymore are being picked before me. Is it even worth it for me, And first thing I'd like to hear from you, if you have any insight on this, how does RedBull pick their casters? Is it all just about popularity, whoever is bigger? I remember Dave telling me that's not necessarily the number one criteria, but I have to assume this plays a big role too.
I mean, they've never come to me with a list of criteria, right? I think it's all speculation. I do think it's fairly easy to assume such things, though. So I'll just kind of go out on a limb and assume. When you host an event, you want reach, you want viewers, right? So I think definitely one of the criteria is how popular is an individual. And I think this is very much not always the case with anything, because who is good at something is very subjective, I suppose, right?
In the case of a caster, absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely, right? But I feel as though their approach is like, well, if this person's getting more viewers, this person must be good enough for the job. Boom, move on, next topic, right? So that might be part of kind of their thinking. I do also think at this point, so, we had the first RedBull LAN. Well, there were a bunch of offline events, right? And in the case of like the RedBull side, my interactions were with the same people that I would now interact with, right? Maybe some slight changes with whatever production company is utilized, or some of those intricacies, but the RedBull contacts are still RedBull. It is absolutely so important to have good synergy and good communication and get a feel and comfortability with the people that are working for you, or the people you're working with, in my case. And so I think Jordan's kind of the exception because he wasn't part of any of these productions before. But at least in the case of like all the other names, maybe not on some of the online events, but for the most part has been for a while, they could look at it and be like, we did great last time, let's run it back, as opposed to branching out and taking what they could see as a risk. So I think it's probably a mix of even beyond how good they think someone's going to do with a job. I think it's risk aversion. They don't want to take risks. This is extremely expensive and risky in so many other ways. And then also just the reach they think that they can bring in from the people they brought.
I just wish they would be a little bit more courageous and maybe get one unknown name and just throw it in there, see how he goes with the whole thing. Because one name, even if he happens to be horrible and not mash up, have no chemistry with any of you guys, it's just one guy. At the end of the day, you're still going to have a good show. Again, I want to make it incredibly clear this has nothing to do with Neely and Jordan. I love them both. They're going to do an amazing job. I have absolutely no doubt about that. It's just about the situations that they represent, right?
Sure.
But yeah, I still look at these guys. I don't know. You know for sure who I'm talking about. Someone like, I don't know, Warren Liu, T West, Daniela. I don't know. These guys have been busting their asses off. I'm sure they've been waiting for an opportunity for ages. And so they look at this, and I imagine how demoralizing that this must have been. So as the most popular content creator, which you undoubtedly are, at least in the competitive scene, what would be your advice to these folks who are desperately trying to make it and waiting for a chance to actually put themselves in front of a big audience?
That's really tricky. Like my situation is entirely different, right? Like if someone comes to me even now and says, what did you do? How did you focus on things when you started? Streaming and content creation and Age of Empires, the potential in various ways was just so different then. So I will say before I give any advice that, I'm in a very fortunate position now, and my road is likely, or even suggestions I may have, might not fit another individual. It feels like just the most hollow advice ever to someone, but my advice would be, if you're having fun and you enjoy your community and you enjoy the game, keep doing your thing and hope that opportunity will come. Now, that is, again, they might immediately say,
fun doesn't pay the bills. Yeah.
I've been doing that, right? Well, it doesn't, right? But I think that I don't think there's many people that'll last very long in this business if they're not having fun in the first place, right? Unless you've got like contracted hours that force you to go online, I think you're not going to spend, especially if your viewership's even lower, right? Even lower than that others are fortunate to have. I think that fun and enjoyment is still a really big part of it. So I think that focusing on that is really important. I think what's tricky here is, again, back to our qualifier conversation. The format for this event is not very conducive to a lot of expansion with the casters. You look back at other events, we had 14 players, which again was our whole kind of thing with the qualifiers. It's like we had more players, it's fine.
That's a very good point.
And we had like over a week dedicated for the event. If there was a time to bring in someone fresh and integrate them to a show, it's when you've got a week plus, right? This is like 3 days. I maybe should know the exact format because I'm going to be there, but I don't know if it's even been fully posted yet.
I think it has. I think it's 4 days, so it's 4 days of casting and
But like it's not going to be group stage. It's going to be much faster, I think. And so again, back to the whole risk thing from RedBull's side, it's like they can't afford to mess around because there's so much less sets and so much less games. I'm in agreement with you. I love Neely and Jordan to death. But I could see how it could be really discouraging to people who haven't, moved on from Age of Empires to not get the call. I wish, I really just don't know what advice to give beyond keep sticking to your thing and see what happens from there, which is, again, not great advice, right? Like, I can't think of anything beyond it, truthfully.
Okay. I mean, it's a tough position for you as well, because you know them as well, of course. But I'm happy that you have the same feeling, because I know that you care a lot about like up and coming players, and I care a lot about up and coming content creators, because I think the problem goes both ways, right? We have like very established casters and content creators, and how do you break that? How do you get more popular? And sometimes it doesn't have anything to do with quality. I think you would agree that just because quality is so subjective too. So, right. What's a good content creator? Everybody's going to give you 20 different answers.
It's really tough.
How can XQC be so popular? It's one thing I'll never be able to explain or understand. Just that kind of thing, right? Regardless, I'd like to know, and you don't need to have anyone in mind, what, in your opinion, makes a good caster, for example? What do you look for in a good caster? Totally subjective, I know.
Yeah. I mean, and that's different than like what I believe is important for casting too, right? Because a lot of the opinions I have is maybe more suited towards me. But I would say, like, I really think it's important to talk about the game in a way where you're not just talking about the game. Now, that sounds really stupid, right? But like, I encourage anyone to just like literally just go load up a game just watch it, no one talking, I think people are gonna be like, that was an incredibly boring game. It was a 2-to-1 eco KD. They both added TCs. There was one moment and it was over. And I think it could be very easy when you're casting to simply just talk about what's happening, which again seems as though that's kind of what the job is with casting. But you know, each everything that happens in a game has some type of consequence, which goes 3 or 4 steps down the line. And I think that is what people need to hear, right? That is how the game works. And so, you know, you want to avoid being like, oh, that was a good crossbow shot on the mangonels. Now he's making knights. Instead, it's like, that was a good crossbow shot on the mangonels. Mangonel shot in the crossbows, right? Now such and such is going to have to work towards this. And because such and such is working towards this, will this person expect that, right? Like, there's just ways to approach it.
Create stories.
And it's not like, you know, the creating stories is essentially what that becomes. But it's not creating a story just for the sake of a story to engage the viewer. It's literally how the game plays out. All these things are intricately connected. But again, that's a style thing, right? And if you put someone with me who does that, we might not really jive that well. Which is another thing too. Another idea could be, you look at the styles of the so-called established casters, and you just try and fill a niche that is not filled there already.
Good idea,
right?
I think there's one blatant one, in my opinion. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
We have no play-by-play caster, in my opinion, or no dedicated play-by-play caster.
Yeah.
We have Dash. He does it, and he does it very well, in my opinion. But he's not incredibly active in the community, I want to say. But otherwise, don't you agree with this? Someone who just like describes what's happening, and of course, it's going to be very difficult for someone like that to cast alone. You'd always wish to pair him with someone who gives more analytical information. But I think we have a blatant lack of play-by-play casters. Maybe. Would you agree?
Maybe. I personally think play-by-play is super overrated for Age of Empires 2.
Okay.
As I've just described. I think it can get very monotonous if you're just talking about what's happening. And I think Dash is able to do that, but also does other things really well.
Can I offer a counter argument? Very often I listen to Age of Empires games when I'm at the gym or whenever I'm driving and I can't really watch the whole thing.
Okay.
I miss play-by-play. Because
I like, what the hell, what's happening?
I can sort of tell sometimes what's happening, and I want to say you and Dave are particularly good at this, but still, none of you is pure play-by-play, and sometimes I miss it, and that's the kind of value that I think play-by-play could add.
Well, as a counter to your counter, though, majority that's probably someone streaming, right? And there's a lot more focus on digressing a little bit for the sake of it, because you're online every day or interacting with the message, which when you're in a castle, you're not doing any of that, right?
That's true. Yeah.
So I think, but I mean, those are just all solid ideas. Again, like what I think is kind of the key to it is, unless you're not inviting certain individuals that are already established, which I think people are going to be resistant to doing. I think that hopefully we can get these events to a point or back to a point where we can actually have more room for it, right? Again, 14 players in a castle, previous Red Bulls.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Perfect opportunity. A week plus long event, perfect opportunity. A really short span event with only 8 players. It is probably really hard for Red Bull to justify changing a lot from what they did in the past. And also like really expanding the caster pool bigger to what it was before. So
that's an excellent point. I hadn't thought about it. It's just too short to take too many risks. I agree 100% actually.
Yeah.
So as you'll remember, in a past life, feels like ages ago, I used to be a caster myself. So I do have a bit of an opinion of what, for me, again, this is incredibly personal, makes a good caster. And interesting enough, I have a much more technical thing for me. And I want to hear your opinion on this, though, if you agree or disagree. I find, especially for non-native speakers, English fluency is essential. Now, even if you're fluent in English, though, I also think, and I've noticed this in a lot of native speakers, actually, not necessarily in our community, but in other communities, that even if you're a native speaker, a lot of people are very monotone in terms of delivery. You know, they speak like this the whole time. They don't go up, they don't go down. And it's so incredibly frustrating for me to listen to something like that. I want to hear some dynamic delivery, I'm going to say, you know. Now, this can easily go the other way, too, when you're going way too crazy, way too often, for sure.
Yeah.
And last thing I'll say, which I believe is also very important, and I felt this when I was casting myself, is I need a high-energy co-caster. If I'm hyped for a particular game and I hear that my co-cast is just going, yeah, that's true, it's so frustrating. You know, I need someone who matches my energy. And I think this is something that Dave is actually excellent at. I assume all the casters are excellent at. But one thing I've noticed with Dave, and this was particularly noticeable in one video that we just recorded, like, I don't know, like a month ago. It was like a quiz. We had a quiz with, what was it? Dao, Terra, Dave, Margugu. And a lot of people were like in the comment section, why is Dave so pissed? I mean, well, why is he acting so, why is he acting like this? And I know exactly, I don't know if people say this because they're not content creators and they don't really see what's happening, but I immediately see what's happening here. Dave is pretending is the wrong word, but Dave is being extra engaged because you know that's what makes content exciting. And that's what makes content, that's what makes people enjoy the type of content, that he really matches the energy of the whole show. I think Dave is excellent, and I thank him so very much for doing that. But people sometimes see this in a different direction. Well, what do you have to say about all of this?
I mean, I know Dave very well. I didn't watch the particular video, but like, I feel as though
shame on you.
Sometimes it's just someone's personality too, man. Like, you can't fake it. You can't fake it over a long stream. You just kind of are who you are. I agree with you that it's, and maybe this is something I could suggest to any caster for that matter, is you look at your cast, don't eliminate the fun of it, right? Eliminate your cast, but then think, okay, what could I do differently? Like, for years, I used to re-list my own cast, which is extremely uncomfortable, and think, how can I present that particular thing differently? How could I tweak this? And to this day, I'll tell you what, you're never going to feel like you're complete because you're just always going to be picking yourself apart. But that helps, right? So maybe that could be something that some people could do. But also, man, like, I'd be willing to bet that Dave was genuinely annoyed with what was happening there, because whether it's because he's competitive or, and even if it wasn't like 100% genuine, it's at least like maybe close to 50, right?
Yeah, no,
so
I don't want to imply that he wasn't being genuine.
Either.
Yeah, I don't want to imply he wasn't being genuine. I think this is him just trying to make the whole thing more exciting and really matching your energy.
Sure.
This is something he does incredibly well. And as a host or as the creator of the video, you're so thankful when people give you that. Again, there's nothing worse when you put so much work into making a video and people are going to be, there's no worse feeling than that.
Yeah, but I guess my point here is like, there are times where, if your suggestion or the idea is match the energy in the room, that is also sometimes very difficult if it just doesn't jive with you.
Right.
There have been moments, love him to death. I can't match that energy on that particular day, right? Because he's just going crazy. And so it wouldn't fit me to match that necessarily. Now, what you can try and do is you can find a fit for it, which is a completely different conversation. Caster pairings, the how you fit with an individual, which varies from everybody, from each caster. But I agree with you. But it is also really important that as an individual you stay true to yourself. But to your point, I agree. Like, I think that people want a little bit more inflection in the voice, and that kind of comes back to kind of that story approach, I guess, right? It's like, oh, this is an important part in the story. Voice gets a little bit higher, right? And then it dips back down, and then it builds up. The important moments feel better when it's clear, you know.
Yeah.
And so, it's very interesting. Like, I find talking about this so fun, right?
Me
All
too.
the different styles
Me
and
too.
what you can do and how you can approach various things. I find it really fun. But
Dash has told me once that he finds in Age of Empires 2, and again, this goes back to the play-by-play thing, he finds in Age of Empires 2, it's very hard to figure out when you're going to peak with your voice. Because, a battle takes such a long time.
Yeah.
And when you see a mangonel shot, for example, is this one going to hit really high? Do I need to go high with my voice right now? Or is there going to be a second one? Right? It's so interesting the way he broke it down for me. Because with League of Legends, for example, whenever there's a team battle, it can just go up in pitch, and it can just go crazy.
Yeah.
It's one moment it's going to be big. There is no chance this is not going to be big.
It's tough too, because you can take the same like mangonel shot on crossbows, and put it in 10 different game situations, and the reaction to that, in my opinion, should be different, right? I have a real issue where I'll look back at a moment that's like clipped or highlights or whatever. What a big shot!
Oh, why didn't I go crazier?
I don't. Well, in my mind, I'm like, that was someone important. Like that guy was on 200 pop. He's got 20 stables queued up with hussars. That mangonel shot was someone important. That was a throwaway army. But then for a casual viewer, you're like, whoa, 20 crossbows just died. So that's tricky. I'm like, well, should I have reacted to that? In my mind, I'm stubborn. I'm like, no, that shit was not important at all. But then like, you'll have other people, be like, rah, and people love it. So it is tough. It is tough. And, I don't think there's any exact science to it.
A very important point, though, I want to take away from this that you just said there. At the end of the day, you do have to be yourself. So don't try to change yourself too much.
Yeah.
Because people are going to smell that. People are going to see that.
And it's not fun anymore. If you're putting on an act, you could be partial, maybe. Everyone's got everyone, as you said, when the cameras are on, you're creating content. Maybe everyone goes a little crazy here or there with intention. But yeah, you got to be yourself. But yeah, I think like the theme thus far in our conversations, as it's all related to Red Bull, really has been we feel both sides, like the qualifying format, main event, and then the casting side would benefit from just a slight expansion, ever so slight, both directions. And then Neely Jordan coming in, probably not question at all, because you got like an extra name or two joining, right? The ladder qualifier. Same deal. So it's tricky, but something that everyone really needs to remember is that this is internet in a castle. People from all over the world. This is a game that, many people thought was dead and then came back and fortunately are listening to this podcast. And I don't know all the money that's being thrown around, but it's probably way more than the prize pool.
100%.
I know that there's a ton of stress on making these types of events happen for Red Bull. So that's where I try and remember, like, look at it with some context, and just still be thankful for the situation we have. Nelson, I don't know if viewers ever really heard this, but like at the end of that last Red Bull, I was just gutted, and most people were too, because it was known at that time Red Bull's done, right? Okay. We didn't think Red Bull was ever coming back. I didn't think I was ever going to see Riley again, right? So, at least from my perspective, I'm like, we're back, baby. let's build on this, hopefully, right? Let's make everybody happy, and then they can come back, be like, hey, we're doing it again. What tweaks can we make? And then maybe they listen to the podcast and maybe they hear, what can be tweaked. But yeah, again, that's tricky. No one wants to hear like, just because we should be grateful that Red Bull's coming back doesn't mean we can't also talk about what could have been better. But a lot of it's money.
It's money.
A lot of it's just, the event format is a little tight.
By the way, I think we might have one of the Red Bull guys in the podcast. This is not guaranteed, but if people do stay tuned for that. The
owner of Red Bull is joining?
I can't say too much because it's not guaranteed, but there's a good chance that's something we're going to have a big guy here. And so okay. I can have some interesting questions. Tristan, last question for you. Is there one particular caster in our community that you particularly like and you would like to see at an event?
Oh, what are you doing to me?
Yeah,
dude?
I know it's tough,
so
but
many.
I'm going to give you a name as well. So it's only fair.
Okay, well, again, it's very hard to look at merit, right?
No,
it's very hard to look
so
at merit.
Subjective. 100% subjective. Yeah.
But some aspect of this, in my opinion, is based on merit. Like, you look at the current list, who would be next on that list is kind of the way I'm viewing this. Mm-hmm. And I think about like the amount of time spent on the game, the amount of casting they do, their level, have they cast other events before? And the first name that comes to mind for me is Ornlu. Mm-hmm. Because like when I wasn't able to make it to the DreamHack event, Ornlu first person got the call, went there, did well.
Great job.
I felt, Hidden Cup, brought him in for the first time in a Hidden Cup. He did well. And there's probably other examples too. And he also does spend a lot of time covering the game. So it's not like you're bringing in someone who, isn't covering these events a lot, right? He is doing that. And again, time spent on the game does not necessarily mean someone deserves anything. Just like, viewership doesn't necessarily mean it. But that would be my thought is like it would have been a good opportunity for him if the spot was available.
Yeah, so for me, of course, there are a lot of names that come to question. Ornlu, T-West, Fire, Daniela, I don't know, all these people that are really trying hard to improve. I have one name, and that's Survivalist. This guy, he doesn't cast a lot. I don't know why, but he's got the voice. He's got the delivery, in my opinion. So I really look at delivery a lot. And he's got the know-how. He's got the knowledge. So I really would like to see him in a cast. If you organize a tournament, Tristan, consider getting him on the cast. I think it's a good name. Great voice, great guy. I think he'd do amazing. Apart from all the other ones that we just mentioned.
Sure.
Tristan, fun as always, my friend. Thank you so much for taking the time. This is fun talking with you. And to all the people at home, again, if you enjoyed the show, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all of those things. And yeah, you could check. I don't think, if you're here, I'm pretty sure you know about Tristan's channel, but make sure to check him out as well. Tristan, thank you so much for the time, and I'll see you next time, bro.
Absolutely.